Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're tackling, well, a really fascinating and pretty complex mission, actually. We're synthesizing a unique stack of ancient source material, specifically liturgical and devotional readings assigned for October 5, 2025. And these sources, they're challenging because they kind of throw three seemingly contradictory ideas right at us. You've got this need for relentless patience during, total chaos.
Right.
Then this immediate, almost radical call to action. And finally, this requirement for almost incomprehensible humility.
Yeah.
So our goal here is to try and weave these together to understand what persistent, faithful character really looks like when a world around you is just making a lot of noise.
It's a pretty remarkable convergence of ancient thought, isn't it? I mean, you've got texts from the prophet Habakkuk, Paul writing to Timothy, Psalm 95, Luke's Gospel.
Quite the mix.
Yeah, real mix. But they all seem to circle around that core question you just raised. How do you keep your integrity, your purpose, when the results you were banking on just aren't showing up, or maybe seem delayed indefinitely?
Okay, so let's dive in where the sources start us off. Right in the middle of a crisis. The first reading, it just throws us into this raw, emotional, spiritual breakdown of the prophet Habakkuk. And he is really not holding back at all.
He isn't.
He's demanding answers. He's crying out, "How long, O Lord? I cry for help, but you do not listen. I cry out to you violence, but you do not intervene." I mean, you can feel the desperation there.
Oh, absolutely. And Habakkuk gives us the full picture, doesn't he? It's total social disintegration. He sees ruin and misery. He sees destruction and violence, and maybe even worse, the internal fighting. Strife and clamorous discord. This isn't some abstract philosophical despair. This is him watching his society literally tear itself apart and feeling completely, utterly abandoned, like the promised help just isn't coming.
So he's demanding rescue right now, but the response he gets from the Lord isn't that rescue, it's instruction. Instruction for how to endure the delay. It's basically a command to play the long game.
That's the crucial pivot point, exactly. The Lord tells him, first, capture the promise. Write down the vision clearly upon the tablets so that one can read it readily.
Okay.
It's almost like institutionalizing clarity, making sure the original mission, the promise, doesn't get lost or muddied while everyone's waiting in the middle of all this confusion.
Right. Keep it visible.
Keep it visible. And then comes the promise about the timing. It will not disappoint. If it delays, wait for it. It will surely come. It will not be late.
So failure is off the table. Only delay.
Precisely. It reframes the whole situation. It eliminates the possibility of ultimate failure, leaving only the challenge of enduring the delay.
And here's the bit that really, I think, connects that ancient prophetic promise to maybe our modern reality. It's the distinction the text makes between the rash and the just. It says, "The rash one has no integrity, but the just one, because of his faith, shall live."
Yeah, that's fascinating. Because the critique isn't really about, say, moral failure in the typical sense. It's about rashness, impatience.
Impatience, okay.
The rash person, in their desperation for immediate results, they grasp at short-term fixes, maybe unsustainable solutions, and in doing that, they ultimately sacrifice their integrity. But the just one, they anchor their future not on what they can see right now, but on that unseen promise, their persistence, their very ability to wait, that becomes the measure of their faith, and it's the key to their survival, their life.
That distinction, the integrity needed for the long wait, that perfectly sets us up for the next theme, doesn't it? If the vision's delayed, what are we supposed to do in the meantime?
Right.
We're clearly not meant to just sit around twiddling our thumbs. Paul, in his letter to Timothy, gives us this sort of internal, maybe psychological toolkit we need to maintain our character during that waiting period. Paul tells Timothy to actively stir into flame the gift of God that he received. It's not about waiting for some new miracle from outside, but about activating the resources you already have inside you to deal with that external crisis Habakkuk was describing.
And Paul is really explicit about what those resources are. God gave a spirit of power and love and self-control. What's really key is the opposite he mentions.
Yeah.
It was specifically not a spirit of cowardice.
The contrast again.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Cowardice is what drives the rash one we just talked about. It makes them grab for those quick fixes or just abandon the vision altogether when things get tough.
Okay.
And this concept of self-control, I think it often gets overlooked, but it's absolutely vital here. It's the mental discipline you need to sustain that long-term commitment.
Right.
It's what lets you hold on to the clarity of the vision, like Habakkuk was told to write down, even when it feels like it's taking forever. It's the mechanism, really, that ensures the power and the love don't just dissipate into chaos or lead to burnout.
And the practical application of this internal stirring is immediate and it's external. Paul says, don't be ashamed of the testimony, and you've got to bear your share of hardship for the gospel with the strength that comes from God. So it's a call to active endurance, recognizing that the strength to handle the kind of crisis Habakkuk faced comes from that internal toolkit Paul's talking about: power, love, self-control.
And we see this active posture showing up again in the responsorial psalm, Psalm 95. Active faith here means, coming together, singing joyfully, bowing down. It's this physical, communal demonstration of loyalty and trust.
Okay, so it's not just an individual thing.
Not at all. But the central warning in that psalm gives us this crucial link back to Habakkuk's long wait. The refrain warns, if today you hear his voice, harden not your hearts. The danger isn't just that God might delay. The danger is that you might fail during the delay, that your heart hardens.
And the psalm uses that really specific historical reference to hammer the point home, right? It warns against behaving as at Meribah, as in the day of Massa in the desert.
Exactly. And what's so pointed about Meribah and Massa is that those ancestors, they hardened their hearts after seeing absolutely monumental miracles.
Right, they'd already seen proof.
They had. The psalm says they had seen my works, yet they still tested God. They still wavered when things got tough in the desert. And this directly contrasts with the kind of faith Habakkuk needs, which is persistence before the big vision is fulfilled.
So the point is, even seeing proof isn't a guarantee.
Precisely. Even having seen proof, it's still possible to fail the test of endurance, which means that internal self-controlled discipline Paul talks about in 2 Timothy, it's always necessary. It's not just a temporary measure.
Okay, that level of required persistence and discipline and courage, it really makes sense why the apostles, when we get to the gospel reading from Luke 17, they just sound completely exhausted.
Yeah, you can feel it.
They look at Jesus and basically just say, increase our faith. Like, we can't do this. The standard's too high.
And Jesus' response is just brilliant, but also almost jarring, isn't it? It's this two-part lesson that seems to pull in opposite directions at first.
How so?
Well, first, he defines the absolutely monumental power, the efficacy of even the tiniest bit of faith. And then, immediately after, he defines the radical standard of service required from the person who might wield that power.
Okay, break that down. Part A.
Part A is the scale of power available to faith, the size of a mustard seed. And the illustration he uses is just completely over the top. It's intentionally extreme.
Right.
The power to command a mulberry tree, this big, deeply rooted, long-lasting tree to just be uprooted and planted in the sea. I mean, think about that image.
It's absurd physically.
Totally absurd. And the tree obeys. So the message seems to be, look, if you're not seeing results, it's not because your faith is quantitatively too small. Yeah. Even the smallest amount of genuine faith holds this almost limitless potential.
Okay, but this is where I kind of have to pause and almost challenge the text a bit. Because if our faith, even if it's tiny, has this earth-shattering power to, throw trees into the ocean, why does Jesus immediately pivot to a story that basically tells us we're worthless? How do you possibly reconcile that? Monumental world-changing power on one hand, and this absolute radical self-effacement on the other.
That is the paradox, isn't it? And the parable of the servant, I think, is Jesus' direct answer to that exact tension. It fundamentally dismantles our modern ideas about, transactional success or entitlement based on effort.
Okay, explain the parable then.
So think about the scene he paints. The servant comes in after a long, hard day out plowing or tending sheep. Now, under any kind of modern work agreement, what would the boss say?
Great job, take a break, get something to eat, you earned it.
Exactly. But the master in the parable says, prepare something for me to eat. Put on your apron and wait on me while I eat and drink. You may eat and drink when I am finished.
Continuous, uninterrupted service. But the part that really challenges our, incentive-driven minds is that the master is not grateful. He's not thankful to the servant for doing the plowing. Why?
Because the work was an obligation. It was simply the servant's duty inherent to their role, their relationship with the master. You don't get special thanks, the parable implies, for just doing what you were commanded to do.
Wow.
And this is the revolutionary insight, I think. It completely eliminates that transactional model of faith, the idea that, okay, I do X amount of good works or show X amount of faith, therefore God owes me Y result, or at least owes me a thank you.
So success isn't measured by the miracle, the moved tree.
Exactly. Success in this framework isn't measured by the spectacular outcome, like the move tree. It's measured by the quiet, sustained, faithful duty performed, completely regardless of recognition or reward.
And the ultimate takeaway, that line that just sticks with you, that required statement of really profound humility. After doing everything commanded, the disciples have to say, "We are unprofitable servants. We've done what we were obliged to do." Unprofitable servants. I mean, that phrase, it makes it so clear that their work doesn't generate some kind of merit or profit or like cosmic debt relief for them.
Right.
It just means their baseline effort was enough to meet the minimum requirements of their duty. It shifts the entire focus away from the achievement, which could be as massive as moving a tree squarely onto the attitude of the heart performing the duty.
Precisely. And the devotional source that we looked at alongside these readings, it really encapsulates this synthesis perfectly, I thought. It reinforces that our works are not a reason for pride, but an expression of love and obedience.
Okay.
And it establishes that faith grows through faithful service. It's not just about believing harder. It's about doing the duty faithfully.
So service actually builds the faith needed for the waiting.
That seems to be the connection. And this ties right back to that self-control Paul was talking about in 2 Timothy. When your service is driven by obligation and love, rather than a desire for profit or recognition or even thanks, you're kind of protected from the impatience of that rash one Habakkuk warned about.
Right, because your motivation isn't external results.
Exactly. You serve because of who you are, because of the relationship, not because of what you expect to get back immediately. And that devotional source, it brings it down to a really practical level. It asks the listener, basically you reading it, what simple act of service can I offer today to show my faith and trust in God's will? It's this call to sort of shrink the potentially massive power of the mustard seed faith down to the quiet, daily, often unseen act of simple duty.
Okay, so if we pull back now and just look at the whole spectrum of this deep dive, we've really covered the entire required life cycle of faith, haven't we?
Seems like it.
You've got enduring the long wait without being rash, like Habakkuk, actively developing that internal discipline, power, love, self-control, like Paul tells Timothy, avoiding the failure of the hardened heart, learning from the mistakes in Psalm 95, recognizing the monumental potential power in even tiny faith from the first part of Jesus' teaching in Luke.
Right.
And then ultimately defining our entire worth, not by that power, but by the humble, dutiful service described in the second part of Luke's gospel.
Yeah, it's quite a journey through these texts. And what remains constant, I think, across all these seemingly difficult, maybe even contradictory standards, is the permanence of the mission itself. As that Elihu verse puts it, the word of the Lord remains forever.
Okay.
So the commitment to this kind of persistent faith, this kind of action combined with humility, it's not presented as just a temporary fix during a crisis. It seems to be the constant ongoing expectation.
Right. Which leaves us with a pretty provocative thought for you, the listener, to maybe explore this week. We're told, on one hand, to wait patiently, potentially for a very long time, for the vision Habakkuk was promised. And simultaneously, we're told to believe we have the power to command a mulberry tree into the sea. So if true faith, as these texts seem to suggest, is ultimately defined not by the miracle it achieves, but by the quiet, consistent, dutiful service of that unprofitable servant, does this framework change how we think about things like sustained ethical leadership or maybe just getting through difficult times with integrity?
That's a great question.
What does it actually look like in practice to pursue potentially massive world-changing faith alongside that kind of radical, fundamental humility? How do we ensure that the power or even the potential for power doesn't corrupt the integrity we need during the inevitable delays? Something to think about.